Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken, and for the second week in a row, I'm not joined by Brian Dick. I'm joined by Joseph Chapman. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Alex. Yeah, how are you? Been a good week, busy week. How was your trip to South East London?
Oh, long, very, very long. Just right bang in the centre of London. It's my first visit to Charlton, actually. And it was, really close to Millwall, awful to get to. So I'm glad that one's out of the way, but then we've got it again in 2 months' time. So Wickham's a little bit easier on Saturday.
It's a nice ground. It's a lovely ground, but it needs to catch up. I think if Charlton ever get back to the Championship, then they need a few updates, I think.
Yeah, it is a decent ground. Just to lay the table for you guys listening in, we are going to be just touching on the opening two games, looking ahead to Wickham, and then speaking about a couple of individuals, George Hall and Jay Stansfield, to name two, and then taking questions from you guys. We've had a lot of questions. We're really grateful for that, as ever. Makes up a large section of the podcast, but we're only able to answer 4 or 5. You don't want us droning on for hours on end. So yeah, thanks for everyone, especially those who we don't get round to. We'll try and get round to a question of yours in further weeks. Joe, to kick off, first two games, speaking generally about both of them, have you been impressed by Blues? I know Reading wasn't what we expected or wanted, but Charlton looked better.
Yeah, I'll have to be guided by you, Alex, with the Charlton game. I didn't see that, but I did watch the Blues game at home to Reading on the first day of the season. And there was an element of what I expected to see, to be honest. I think the idea that Blues were going to just blow every single team out of the water was a little bit fanciful, to be honest with you. Regardless of whether you think Blues are going to win the league and win it comfortably or get promoted, whatever, I think there are going to be moments in the season, not more so than at the very beginning when they've got so many new players to integrate, where there would be a few teething problems. And Reading looked every inch a team that are not only hardened to League One, but also are a side who have been together throughout pre-season. I saw a stat, which I'm sure a lot of Blues fans will now be familiar with, because it was shown in comparison with Blues, that Reading are the only team that haven't signed a player this summer in the whole of the EFL. Yeah. So in that respect, it didn't surprise me so much that they looked quite smooth and seamless with the way they played their football. I think they've got a very, very talented manager as well for the division. So yeah, I mean, they just looked calm and were able to move the ball around. Blues came out of the traps initially, and I thought that full stadium atmosphere, expectation, the pressure that comes with all of the above. They looked a little bit nervous at times on the ball. They were running the ball out of play. There were a few times where Ethan Laird would get to the byline and miscontrol it, or take too heavy a touch, or a pass that would be laid out in front of him would be too heavy. Maybe a little bit of pent-up energy at the beginning of the season. But I was more impressed with Blues in the second half, the way they responded. You might not have been privy to it in the press box, but there was a moment where Sky showed a replay of Chris Davis and he was going absolutely ballistic on the touchline. I thought that was quite a useful little insight, actually, into what he's like on the touchline, because we don't have anything to go by up till now as to what he might be like. And he had no issues at all in barking out orders and instructions and disciplining players when he didn't think they were doing the right things. So it's a learning curve, isn't it, from the beginning, for everybody, for supporters, as regards to what the players the club have brought in, they're going to be like, from the management's perspective, the personality, and then Alfie May does what you expect Alfie May to do, I suppose, at the end of it.
Yeah, there is a question coming about Chris Davis' demeanour on the touchline, and he is, the one thing I will say before we go on to that, like, I don't want to completely go into it, but he is intense, very intense. Against Charlton, I actually thought Blues were quite passive in the opening 15, 20 minutes. And then obviously Charlton had that penalty, an awful penalty, comfortable save for Ryan Allsop, doing his chances of staking a claim to be number one, no harm there. And then Blues kind of took control after the goal. It was a really nice passing move, actually, which led to the goal. And Brandon Kehler had obviously played at left back, but he was given freedom to go into midfield, his natural position of central midfield when Blues are in possession, and he obviously advanced forward, found a lovely bit of space, and what a strike, what a way to score your first goal. A fantastic moment for him, and then he obviously pulled out the Jude Bellingham celebration. Speaking to him afterwards, it was completely intentional. He wanted to do it. I don't think he quite realised that it was actually at Charlton where that celebration was born, but it was quite fitting and nice to see him score that goal and do that celebration. So yeah, kudos to him. Blues were in control, complete control from there on, I think. Charlton didn't really have any clear-cut chances. Blues had a couple in the second half. Alfie May had one that he snatched. That was obviously desperate to score against his former club. But they looked strong, and it was a Blues team that had made 8 changes. So, that shows the depth of the squad. It also shows the depth of the squad that it's a squad that's without Lee Buchanan at the moment because of injury. George Hall is probably going to go out on loan. We'll come on to him later. He wasn't in the squad. Ramel Donovan didn't make the 20-man squad because it's 20 in the Cups, whereas it's 18 in the league. That's going to be quite the problem for Chris Davies, I think, because keeping all these players happy is maybe not going to be the easiest task over the course of a season. But yeah, I was thoroughly impressed by Blues against Charlton. One player I do want to pick out is Christoph Clara, because I thought he was absolutely fantastic. Solid in all of his defensive work, really, really comfortable in possession. And, Dion Sanderson getting sent off with 10 minutes to go has pretty much handed the baton to Clara, gives him a chance, probably that he didn't expect so early on in his Blues career, because he would have had to, after the pre-season Sanderson had, wait for his time. But he'll get that chance to start alongside Christian Bielik, and given the way he played against Charlton, I wouldn't fancy Sanderson getting back in a hurry.
I thought Sanderson had a really good pre-season from what I saw of him. Yep. Perhaps, I don't know, multitude of things that went on at the back end of last season off the field, losing the captaincy, maybe a bit of a relieving of the pressure, possibly, the duty and responsibility that goes with that. He just looked quite comfortable, maybe a new voice on the touchline that put a little bit of confidence into him. The way he was bringing the ball out from the back, the way he was playing those longer passes. So yeah, I mean, it's a shame, really, in one way that he's now going to be missing. But at the same time, I think Clara and Bielik are the partnership that a lot of Blues fans would actually quite like to see as well. Clara has clearly not come to Blues to sit on the bench and in the long term, and Bielik being captain and being the footballer that he is, it's not a bad fallback, is it, for Davies to call on? It's
not, no. And moving on to Wickham, I do think against Charlton we saw the makings of a functional Blues 11. There's obviously so much quality in this squad. I think we've been waiting to see the players that are going to kind of stand out and the players that are going to nail down their places. Obviously, we've mentioned Clara and Bielik now have the opportunity to become that first choice central defensive pairing. You would think that Ethan Laird just about has the edge on Alphonse Samsted, given that he's been there the entire pre-season and hasn't done loads wrong in the first 2 games. I think he'll get more chances to keep his place. But having said that, Samsted hasn't joined to sit on the bench. Alex Cochrane is clearly nailing down the left-back spot in the absence of Buchanan. One detail I really liked in the middle of midfield, we know Blues are short on midfield players and one will likely come in to replace Jordan Jones before the end of the window. But Sung Ho Peck, when he came on, as the more advanced midfielder against Charlton, with Mark Leonard sitting and holding the midfield, I thought Peck was superb. Going forward, having that license to roam a little bit and get it towards the box or into the box at times. We know he's got more quality than just a player who can kind of sit in midfield and dictate play. I was watching him in pre-season as the anchor man. He actually looked bored at times, just sitting there and kind of spraying passes around. I think you need more from him. He's got that energy. He's the complete midfield player. He can score the odd goal as we saw last season against Norwich. So I think that role as the 8, now that Jordan James has gone, will suit Sung Ho Peck really well. I think that's his role. I think Leonard suits the holding role as well, the way he can collect the ball off the centre-backs and move Blues forward. So that's the way around I would like to see that midfield from now on, I think. And then, when you get into the final 4 players, the front players, you've got kind of a plethora of options, haven't you? You've got likely Miyoshi off the right. You've got Keshi Anderson, who's playing so well at the moment. You've got about 3 or 4 different options in the number 10 position. Willem Willemsen is struggling with an injury, so will Luke Harris keep that place? Will Tyler Roberts go into that place? Keshi Anderson can also play there. You've got 3 options now on the left wing. You've got Sariki Dembele, Emil Hansen, who's played well in the last 2 games, coming off the bench against Reading before starting against Charlton. And you've also got Ayumu Yokoyama, who's coming from Japan, obviously a player a player who Blues can afford to be patient with because of his age and where he's come from, but someone who clearly has talent and could force his way into the first choice in that position. And obviously we know who's the number 9 at the moment, Alfie May, but there is the makings of an 11, I think, particularly in the back 6 positions stepping forward. The right back is up for debate at the moment, but I think all of the others are pretty much set in stone, and they're the positions you want fixed, aren't they, Joe?
Yeah, definitely. There'd be no qualms from any Blues fans, I'm sure, about the likes of Bielik, Peck, all the way through the team, but Peacock, Farrell, of course. But at the same time, you still want that proper on your toes kind of competition as well. So we'll see what develops in the next few weeks, I'm sure, as regards to the right back. But what we've seen of Alex Cochrane so far and knowing what he can do early doors means that Lee Buchanan, nobody's crying out for Lee Buchanan to come back, and it actually just gives Buchanan a little bit of extra time to make sure that when he does come back that he's free from the injury as well. So that's a win-win, really. And then, of course, the front four is a little bit different, a little bit more fluid, because I think certainly nowadays in these campaigns, the way they are, Blues will play 50, 55 games this season. You need the bench are as important as the starting 11 more often than not these days. So you can interchange, and it's important to have so many options that can play there, and the versatility of a lot of those players will be key as well. Yeah,
I'm just going to quickly put down my 11 for Wickham on Saturday. I've already mentioned that Willemson is struggling with a knee injury. Didn't really get a definitive update from Chris Davies after the game on Tuesday. He said it's ongoing still. It's something he's obviously been managing since the end of pre-season. Peacock Farrell, I think, will play in goal. I think it would be hard to drop a goalkeeper based on the strength of another goalkeeper's performance when you've changed them for cup reasons. Ethan Laird, I think, will keep out Samstead this early on at right back. Then you've obviously got Clara and Bielik at centre back, Cochrane at left back. Leonard as the holder, as I mentioned before, I think is better at the moment. It gives Peck next to him a little bit more licence to roam and wreak havoc. And then I think Miyoshi will come back in on the right. Hansen, I think, will get the nod on the left, even though Dembele didn't play against Charlton, which suggests maybe he was being rested for the weekend. I think Tyler Roberts will get the nod if Willemson's not fit as the number 10. I was really impressed with his performance against Charlton. He was obviously withdrawn 30 minutes early, which suggests maybe he's being saved. So maybe he'll get a chance in that position. Having said that, he hasn't had much chance in that position all pre-season because he's been playing slightly deeper. But maybe he will. And then obviously Alfie May up top. So that 11, very strong on paper. I think we're all expecting Blues to get off the mark this weekend and get their first win. Moving on, and one player who won't be involved against Wickham and may not be involved again for Blues this season is George Hall. Speaking to Chris Davies after the game on Tuesday, he effectively confirmed that Hall will be allowed to go out before the end of the transfer window. Hall hasn't played much in pre-season. When he did play in pre-season, he was often playing at right back just because Blues needed him to play in there because they didn't have an alternative to Ethan Laird. Was clearly down the pecking order in terms of number 10s, given that they've signed Willemson, signed Luke Harris, have 3 or 4 other players who can play there as well. When you look at Ramel Donovan, who can also start in pre-season, that position now isn't getting on the bench. And he's not really being considered for that right wing role either, with Miyoshi and Keshi Anderson, the main 2 guys for that role. So it makes sense, doesn't it, Joe, to send George Hall out on loan. He only played 9 games last season, 8 of them in the league substitute appearances. I think he played under 200 minutes of football due to a succession of hamstring injuries. At 20 years old, he really needs minutes, doesn't he?
He's a very talented player. What I've seen of him previously, Blues have had lots of players cherry-picked from their academy in recent years. I remember there was a young lad that went to Leeds whose name escapes me at the minute, but I remember thinking at the time, that's right, Amari Miller, yeah. And obviously a number of first-teamers aside as well. But Hall always, for me, struck me as a player, especially when he signed the contract, that as long as he could get himself right and fit and sound, then he'd be a serious talent in the Championship, let alone League One. So, that would lead us on to what your opinions are as regards to his loan destination, Alex, because I would have thought the natural maybe hierarchy of the EFL pyramid would suggest that if you're a League One club loaning out a young player, that lower end League One or even League Two would be the obvious way to go in terms of minutes. But you've got a slightly different outlook, haven't you?
Well, I do, yeah. But I suppose managers and technical directors trying to looking around the market for loan players, I probably look at George Hall and see that he didn't play much in the Championship last year and see his injury record in the last 12 months and maybe be a little bit put off. But I think there'll be a number of League Two clubs that will be interested in him. Top-end League Two clubs. I think you'll probably get a number of League One clubs, maybe even higher League One clubs that are targeting playoff places and so forth. I'd be surprised if Blues were willing to let him go to a team that were going to be in direct competition for them this season. Obviously, he couldn't play against them if he was in League One, but still, you'd be surprised they strengthened a direct rival. Which brings me on to a little theory I have. And is it beyond the realms of possibility that George Hall ends up in the Championship? I'm not saying, that it's guaranteed, but if you look at the club I'm looking at is Blackburn. We obviously know how highly rated, how highly John Eustace rates George Hall from his time at Blues. He played him, for a large portion of those games in that first season. Eustace had as the number 10. I remember speaking to Eustace a few times about Hall, and he said that there's no other player at the club that gets through the amount of work in that 4-2-3-1 system as the number 10, going backwards and going forwards. So he clearly rates him. Whether Blues would allow him to go into the league above them, I don't see why it would hurt. It could only increase his stock if he got a full season in the Championship under his belt. He's played pretty much a full season in the Championship when he was 18 and did quite well. I know he would have only started maybe half of those games, maybe even less than half of those games, but he did quite well, especially towards the end of that 22-23 season before he got injured. So I don't think it's impossible that Hall does end up there. I think it's more likely that he ends up at a lower end League One club, but I don't think it's impossible that he goes back into the Championship given how well he performed on the strength of that 22-23 season, because there's clearly a player who can operate there. He just needs the confidence. I think that's what he's been lacking in pre-season for me.
He's a very, very good player, undoubtedly, and versatile and young, and so many different things that are going for him at this moment in time, provided he can get himself fit. And that's the crux, really, is at this moment in time, it's a delicate stage of George's career, whereby I think minutes should precede everything else. Yeah. And is he better off going to a Notts County or a Cheltenham or something like that and playing 45 games or the best part of the Blackburn team, for example, who, okay, good coach, as we know, but you just don't know what the pressure of the Championship is going to be like for Blackburn as well. Relegation scrap. Will Eustace rather turn to an Andy Vyman type player who he knows is a seasoned pro who will be able to deliver at that level than George in that particular moment when he's needed? So if you knew that he was going to go and play 40 games for Notts County, that's just a name plucked off the top of my head. I mean, I'm just thinking of like teams that I expect to be at the top of League Two. Yeah. Or Walsall or someone like that, then, a team that is local enough that you can keep an eye on him. Just at this moment in time, I think just priority is the player's minutes and making sure that he can stay healthy and fit and then being able to perform.
You've sold me on Notts County a little bit. I was just thinking you'd love to have George go to a team like that who play really attacking football. Their attacking players get absolutely shed loads of goals and assists. I think they the team that scored 89 League Two last season and conceded 86.
Yes, and don't get in the playoffs, and then you've got so many good. I mean, they lost Langstaff, but they've still got players. I think players like David McGoldrick are still there. So you've got experienced heads as well. Dan Crowley, Jody Jones. They've got some good players for that level. I think they'll be up there this year. I think the year of League Two under their belt. I think. We're just talking about Notts County on a Blues
podcast now. But George should go somewhere like that and playing a team that scores a lot of goals and get loads of confidence. Not going to be a great deal of pressure on him. He could go somewhere like that and potentially be the standout player in their team and have a season, like you say, where he plays 40, 45 games. And that is maybe what he does need more at this stage of his career, rather than going back into the pressure cooker of the Championship, playing for a team that's going to be towards the bottom and fighting relegation again. So, I think we all just want to see at this stage a fully fit George Hall back to his best and playing with a smile on his face, because, for a player of his age to have pretty much a year wiped out of his career, and not for a serious knee injury, for hamstring issues, is a real blow. And it's been hard to watch. So hopefully he does get fit and firing again. Moving on to another player, there's been on the lips of Blues fans right throughout the summer transfer window, but mainly in the last month it has really ramped up. Jay Stansfield. There has been a development on this, hasn't there, in the last 24, 48 hours with Fulham manager Marco Silva doing a press conference, and he was asked about Stansfield because I think, was it the day after the Blues Awards dinner, Silva came out and said that Stansfield will get a chance at Fulham next season. He sees him as part of the squad because obviously he's done the League One loan with Exeter, done well, done the Championship loan with Blues and done very well individually. and he suggested that he would get a chance. And judging by his comment yesterday, on Wednesday, that hasn't changed. To read it out, Silva said, "After a lot of approaches, I've decided he's going to be part of our squad. He didn't play in Portugal, that was their pre-season training camp, because he had a small issue in a training session and we had to protect him a little bit. He is going to be a player for Fulham Football Club, nothing more to say. We can keep receiving approaches, but our idea is to keep him." That feels pretty conclusive, doesn't it, Joe?
On the face of it, yeah, but I'm pretty sure managers. I'm pretty sure managers have said similar before now, and then the picture changes so dramatically. You just don't know what.
Yeah,
it's almost a brave thing for Marco Silva to say that two weeks out from the deadline, where things can change so quickly, and a player that might be quite up on Fulham's list of targets that becomes available further down the line, and all of a sudden he's looking around his dressing room and he sees Raul Jimenez, Adama Traore, Alex Iwobi. They've got Munoz, haven't they? I think he scored a lot of goals last year. So they've added Emile Smith-Rowe, and all of a sudden you're looking around thinking, is Jay Stansfield getting in this matchday squad? If he does, is he going to be getting enough minutes to satisfy him as a player, because he's just spent a whole season playing at a good level? So all those things considered, it's quite a brave one to say right now that Jay Stansfield is going to be a Fulham player on the 1st of September.
Yeah,
and are going to be able to give him the chance to go and play regularly in the Premier League. That's a big step.
It is. And would a manager really care about, those words kind of being used against him if Stansfield did leave? Or maybe he's just kind of racking up even more interest? You have to think about a lot of things at play here. And
also you've got the fact that, you can also, in time, if Jay Stansfield does end up leaving the club, you can reflect and go, well, the plan is to keep him long term, and
on loan.
And a good one came available. I wonder if that does change Blues' outlook, though, because all along this summer it's been a case of, if we do somehow manage to get Jay back to the club, it's going to have to be on a permanent basis, because that's the only real feasible way that you're going to be able to work the move, because he spent a loan in the Championship. That surely would mean that the Championship would be the lowest he would go again.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make sense to send him out on loan to League One. Does that change Blues' approach to it? If they're able to say, well, can we have him again for another year? And
I don't think it's a loan to Blues, is it? I think it's if Fulham genuinely see Jay Stansfield as part of their future, and they want to loan him out, he goes to a Championship side, they aren't going to be interested in loaning him to Birmingham City in League One.
No.
For sure, I 100% cannot see that happening. The only way I think it happens with Blues if it's a permanent transfer. And despite Silva saying all that, Blues must have had some encouragement, whether it's from Stansfield's camp or the agent or whatever, or even from Fulham, that this deal can be done, because they wouldn't have kind of pursued it, would they, if there was no chance of it happening. I think the feeling inside the Blues camp is that it's probably 50-50, or maybe even less than 50% at this stage, I think, because what Silva has said, the stance Fulham have taken throughout the summer, in that they want to keep Stansfield. But we are into the final 2 weeks of the window, and things do change dramatically at this stage. Like you say, Joe, Marco Silva could see a striker in the first 2 weeks of the season and be like, oh, I really want to sign him. And then he gets to his chairman, the chairman says, we can't do that because we're in trouble. We're in risk of breaching profit and sustainability rules. We need to make 5 or 6 million somewhere. Who can we sell? Jay Stansfield's there. Blues are there with the money waiting. So, it could feasibly still happen. Obviously, it would be a dream if it did. I think the concern, as you alluded to, Joe, is that Blues are putting all their eggs in one basket, and wait for Stansfield and miss out on potentially another good player that they could have signed in the meantime. So I'm sure that's something that the Blues recruitment team have considered. I don't think they'd be pursuing it if they didn't think there was a chance.
But at the same time, neither do I imagine that he is the one and only either. I'm sure that Blues will have an idea. And it might well be that by keeping their powder dry at this moment in time, that other targets are nearing moves elsewhere. But you get to the point, the last 2 weeks of season, Blues are still a huge pull.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where they are at this moment in time as a football club rather than the league status, they're a huge pull. So I don't think they'll have a problem attracting another, very, very good centre forward for the level they're at this moment in time.
Yeah, and they're a pull for Stansfield. We can't really forget the attachment that he developed for Birmingham City in the 12 months that he was here. He was I mean, I've never seen a lone player crying at the end of an awards dinner. I think I asked him why he was kind of so emotional, and he said, it's the kind of wrench of leaving the teammates and things, and obviously made a lot of friends during his time at Blues. His best friend at Blues, Jordan James, has now departed, whether that changes things, who knows? But yeah, so he's clearly well in with the squad, well in with the people behind the scenes. So yeah, hopefully it does happen. But I think, as I've said in previous podcasts, I wouldn't expect it to happen. I still think there are a lot of different things at play at this stage, especially when Marco Silva has made those comments this week. Moving on to questions. Connor Keane first up. Given how well Anderson has started the season, might we get the best out of Miyoshi in the number 10 role? An interesting one. Miyoshi has obviously started on the right, tends to come inside a lot onto his left foot, fits the system when Blues are in possession because he comes inside to create another number 10 as Ethan Laird bombs on down the right.
I like the idea of Miyoshi playing as a 10 going forwards. I think I understand, as you've already alluded to there, I understand why the system works so well with Miyoshi playing where he is and that ability to drift inside, but actually operating as a number 10 where that's the only area of the pitch where that's his area. And I think he can really, really hurt teams. I think he's a really cute footballer with, his ability to pick a pass in tight areas. His low centre of gravity when he's kind of, going to be in the vicinity of huge League One centre halves. I think he'd be a really, really clever footballer to have. Somebody who can go and get the ball from Peck and Leonard and whoever else in midfield. And the fact that Blues have got the ability to then utilise another player within the squad playing on the wing, especially someone who has started the season very well in Keshi Anderson. I thought he looked good when he came off the bench against Reading. I like the idea. I really do. I think someone somewhere is going to have to miss out. That's the thing. Whether it's Willemson, whether it's in order to accommodate that particular arrangement, it would have to mean somebody missing out. But Miyoshi for me is a very, very decent number 10. That's where I would like to see him. I think.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about Willemson potentially not being available for the game against Wickham with a knee injury, then you're looking at replacements. And I mentioned Tyler Roberts earlier, would probably be mine, but I wouldn't be against Anderson playing that role. And then he has the freedom to switch positions with Miyoshi throughout that game, doesn't he? I mean, they're both intelligent players. They're both players who start on the right but are comfortable coming inside. Anderson against Charlton played on the right, but he spent most of his time in possession in midfield, creating an overload with Leonard, Harris, Tyler Roberts, and also Keeler coming in from that far side. So extremely intelligent footballers, capable of interchanging. So I wouldn't be against both of them playing the same 11, to be honest. Definitely not. I think that's a really good point Connor's made. Dave J, what is your take on Chris Davies' demeanour during games compared to your impressions of him at the training ground? He looks to me like he's very focused and driven, but really happy to get animated when necessary. And then there's another part. Has midfield become a little disjointed following JJ's absence? On the Chris Davies bit, you touched on it earlier, Chappers, about him being very animated on the touchline against Reading. I think we saw that in some of the pre-season games as well. He's very loud, screams at the players at times, almost in a kind of in a Mowbray fashion. Mowbray is very much like that, kind of really involved on the touchline. I remember Mowbray being banned, I think, for one game, and he looked absolutely broken up in the stands because he just clearly wanted to be down there, his natural habitat. Davies is very similar in that respect. He leads from the kind of the sidelines, tells the players. He's not one of these managers who thinks once they cross the white line, it's kind of on them that he can't have an influence, because he clearly still thinks he can have an influence. I've not been surprised because he's extremely intense. That's the word I used earlier. In training, incredibly intense, very similar, very animated. It doesn't surprise me he's like that on the touchline. That's probably what the players have become accustomed to in pre-season, and that's what they can expect as long as he is their manager, I think. He's very focused, very driven, very professional, and very serious when he gets onto that training pitch and when he gets onto that touchline. So I think it's a good thing, because I'm not one of these people who kind of likes to lambast managers who sit there and don't do much during games. But I do think when a manager looks so kind of invested on the touchline, it does help you when things aren't going as well, because you're like, oh, he wants to make things better.
Yeah, he knows. You can almost, as a fan, you can kind of rest in the knowledge when you're in the stands or whatever, or watching it on the telly, that the manager's kind of got it under control. He sees things that he's not happy with, and certainly if you're a dissatisfied supporter in that moment, Blues are trailing in the game. Yeah, you trust the players to do the job to a certain degree. Certainly, they're the ones out in the middle, but if Chris Davis is happy with what he's seen, you might be a bit alarmed. Whereas to see him doing what he was doing on the touchline, it was like, oh, okay, he's got it in hand. He sees the things that are wrong, and he's trying to rectify them. There was no naivety. I didn't sense as regards to the fact that it was his first proper game in charge of a football club as a manager. He had no issues at all dishing out some hammerings to some of the players and letting them know that what they were doing wasn't good enough, or they weren't in the right place. So that's a very, very positive sign going forward, I think. Equally, when you come across him as a member of the press, he's a very pleasant, polite man, isn't he? He's very honest in the way he talks, and that's in my short experience of dealing with him. So he can kind of do both. He doesn't strike me as someone who's in his first managerial job.
No. He knows who he is as a manager, doesn't he? I think, which sounds weird because he's only just had his second game as a manager, but he knows who he is. He knows what he wants things to look like. He knows how he wants his team to play. He knows how he wants to be perceived by his players, by his public, his fans, or whatever. So, I don't think we can expect that to change. I think it's a good thing that he's like that. To the second part of that question, has the midfield become a little disjointed following JJ's absence? I don't necessarily agree with that point. I don't think it has. As I mentioned earlier, I think Blues planned for this with the signing of Mark Leonard. I don't think Mark Leonard was signed to be a substitute. I think they probably got good vibes from Peck when he returned from his summer holiday that he would be willing to stick around. And I think they always planned for their midfield to be Leonard and Peck by the end of the transfer window. There'll be someone else, I think, coming in to be competition for those two. I do think they've obviously got the ability for Tyler Roberts to play in a slightly deeper withdrawn role in midfield. They've got Harris, who could also play there. But I do think Leonard and Peck gives you good balance, especially the way it was used against Charlton. Peck, when he came on for the final 30 minutes or so, I thought he was excellent as the number 8, the slightly advanced player in the double pivot. So I think that's something we should see more of. I don't think the midfield looked disjointed. I think it looked okay.
They just need another one. I think that's natural. One leaves, one needs to come in, and it might be that, as you say, it might be that the partnership that they want to go forward with already exists. It's not like you're bringing somebody else in necessarily to go into the starting 11. I made this point, I think, on the last podcast, that they're kind of complementing at this point. With players like Harris, for example, they're complementing what they've already got. I think that'll probably be the case, I'd have thought, because you've got players. It's not ideal, but if ever you got into a situation in League One this season where, they've got a few injuries or whatever, and they're well stocked in that moment at centre half, Bielik can drop in there. I really liked what I saw of Tyler Roberts actually in pre-season, playing as a 6 or an 8, or certainly somebody who, if he's playing with someone like Leonard, is going to be able to advance a little bit from a slightly deeper role than what he would normally be accustomed to. But I think they've got enough there. But certainly one more natural midfielder, I think, just to kind of cover, because that's natural. You lose a player like Jordan James, then another player coming in would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Paul Spindler, do you think Ramel Donovan has a part to play this season, or could you see him going out on loan? I do think he has a role to play. I'm not necessarily saying that Donovan's going to get 30 or 40 games. I think he may get like 20, 15, 25 potentially. I think he'll get some substitute appearances. I think he will occasionally make benches, will occasionally play in games. He'll probably get minutes in the Bristol Street Motors Trophy. I don't see him going out on loan because I feel like with Donovan, someone of his age, he's only 17 still. He's not 18 till November. You don't really want to send him out on loan now, do you? Players don't tend to go out on loan at 17 because he's going to be moving away from his family, moving away from an environment where they want him to learn. While he's at Blues, for example, then keep an eye on him, make sure he's doing the right things, make sure he's growing, into the professional they want him to be, rather than they won't really have eyes on him if he was to go out on loan. So I wouldn't expect him to go out on loan. I think someone of George Hall's age at 19, 20, then yeah, send them out on loan. They've had a season or two in the first team. They're ready to move away from home for the first time. I don't think that would be wise with Donovan, and I don't think it will happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was just about to make that point, actually. They're similar ages, but different parts of their careers, I would suggest. And therefore, it would make obviously a lot of sense for a multitude of reasons for Hall to go out on loan. It depends what the plan is with Donovan in the near future, really. Is Donovan somebody who looked good in pre-season, is at a very, very early stage of his senior career? Is he going to be somebody who's going to be happy enough to not be on the bench very often in League One? If, as we said earlier, a Walsall or whatever was able to say, we'll take him on loan until January or something like that, or maybe the second half of the season, and he goes and plays 20 games in League Two, might be beneficial. But I can kind of understand why, for the time being anyway, that it would make sense to keep him about, because you're only 1 or 2 injuries away then from calling him into the 18-man squad anyway.
Yeah, I feel like a player like that of that age sometimes gets more from kind of sticking around at his parent club and training with the first team than he would if he was going out to a League Two club. I always use the example of Phil Foden at Man City, and he's probably looking at his peers at 17, 18 years old, thinking they're all playing, lots of minutes, and I'm sat here on Man City's bench. But at the end of the day, he was training with David Silva, he was training with Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, he was learning everything, and by the age of 19, he was a regular in that team. So I'm not using, comparing Phil Foden and Ramel Donovan, although they are both left-footed. It's like, that is sometimes a route that coaches like to use. Train with our team, you'll get the odd chance rather than going out on loan. At 17 is a very young age to go out on loan, so I don't think that'll happen. John Morrell, final question. Do you think Samstead will be first choice or Laird? Can't imagine he has swapped European football for the League One bench. I do think Samstead's time at FC Twente was coming to an end anyway, to be honest. He didn't play an awful lot last season. He played a lot of games in the Eredivisie, but he was usually a sub. They got 2 right-backs ahead of him, one of whom is a midfielder who was playing at right-back in pre-season. So I think his time was always coming to an end there. He has played at a high level in Holland. He has played at a very high level in Norway, played for a side that reached the Europa Conference League quarterfinals a couple of seasons ago. So he's clearly got a lot of pedigree at the top level in Europe. I agree, John. I don't think he has come here to a League One side at present to sit on the bench. I think that the key to this deal is that it's a loan with an option to buy. Samstead hasn't fully committed. He's not come over like Willemsen has and said, I'll play for you for 3-4 years. He's come over and said, I'll play for you for this season. If you get into the Championship, I'll gladly sign and focus on getting the club into the Premier League. But I don't think that would be a goer if Blues were in League One again next season, which obviously they don't intend to be. So I do think Samstead will gradually force his way into the League One 11. But again, it's on Ethan Laird. If Laird's got the position at the moment, it's down to Laird to keep the place. It's an exact same carbon copy of the Sanderson-Clara situation. Sanderson has, by getting sent off in a cup game, and it was his own fault with 2 poor yellow cards, has given Clara the chance to stake a claim. Clara is, going to make it damn difficult for Sanderson to get back in the team. If Laird makes a mistake or doesn't play well in a game, Chris Davis can look at the guy on his bench, an Iceland international with 21 caps, who has just played for a team that finished 3rd in the Eredivisie, and say, go on then, there's your chance. And then it's down to him to keep that place. The competition for places in a League One squad Blues have is ridiculous. To have those 2 competing for a right-back spot. We said at times last season when Laird was playing well in the Championship that he's a potential Team of the Year right-back in that league. So to have those 2 competing for one spot is unbelievable. Chris Davis keeps saying 60 games. There's going to be a lot of games for both of them. Laird it is important to note, Laird has only had 60% availability in his Blues career. So, that says Samstead is going to get games. So yeah, it's going to be a good battle.
Well, in the first instance, you just want to make sure that Ethan Laird knows he's not going to have it all his own way. And it's the same for Alex Cochrane, Lee Buchanan, right the way through the squad. And as you just touched on there, I mean, the other thing as well is that you'd really hope it would be the opposite, but you never know. You've never, in Ethan Laird's career, you just don't know when he might pick up a niggle or an injury and just be unavailable for a game or two. And it's so important that in that situation that you've got the cover. And I thought Cody Dramé did okay last year for a large part of the season, and fell out of favour towards the back end. But yeah, you need two good right backs. There's a lot of football clubs that don't have the 4 full-backs that Blues have got in teams above them, never mind in League One.
Yeah. Laird, for me, needs to add an assist to his game. He gets in some fantastic positions. He did against Reading, and the cutback or the final ball or the final action when he got into the box wasn't very good. Against Charlton, he got into some good positions. Again, the ball wasn't always good. I thought his performance against Charlton was better than against Reading. But yeah, he needs to add assist. I think he only got 1 assist in the Championship last season. I think we all perceive Cody Dramé to be a more defensive-minded right back.
Yeah.
And yet Dramé ended the season with 5 assists. And his delivery from out wide, especially whipped crosses rather than cutbacks, was better than Laird's, I would say.
It was. I did the whole FA Cup game where he crossed for Djukovic to score a header, and it's a fabulous ball. But you're right. That was obviously a bit deeper, and the area of the pitch where Laird's going to be operating more this year is going to be much deeper, much more advanced up the pitch, and therefore that quality of supply must be top notch. Yeah,
you need more assists from Ethan Laird, definitely. I think that wraps it all up. Apologies to those who we didn't get round to answering questions from. Please do send in questions throughout the week, and obviously next week. I believe Brian will be back next week, so we'll have.
He's had a whole fortnight off, so surely he can't have any longer.
At this time of year, it's disgraceful. I've got a week off in a couple of weeks, actually. So yeah, thank you, Chappers, for filling in. Thanks everyone for listening as ever. Please do hit like on YouTube, hit subscribe, and obviously on the podcast platforms as well. Please leave comments, and we'll try and get round to looking at them and talking about them in future podcasts. Hopefully, we'll be back after the Wickham game, talking about Blues' first 3 points in League One. It's a big keep right on from both of us.